Conspiracy theories, you know them, you love them, they're the reason you clicked on this video. Conspiracies like ancient giant trees, Nazis on the moon, and Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. And if those caught your attention, be sure to stick around to the end of this video as we go through this chart and go down farther into this rabbit hole. So buckle in as we go to level 1. Now these are all things that have been confirmed to happen to some degree. And I say some because there's so much missing information and clearly much more under the surface of what little answers we've actually been given. And so we're going to start off with NSA Mass Surveillance. Now this is nothing new, and I'm sure that you've heard of it before. There was even a big movie back in 2016 called Snowden that was all about what the NSA was doing. And of course Snowden being about Edward Snowden, who was the whistleblower that leaked all this information about the NSA and how much stuff that they were doing behind the scenes with spying on so many Americans and so many people across the world. Some of the stuff you might not know about with the National Security Agency is one of their divisions that's called Special Source Operations. Snowden actually referred to it as the crown jewel of the NSA and this surveillance that they were doing. It's basically the head over all of the operations whose main purpose was to get information from major fiber optic cables and switches in the US and a few places outside the US. And these operation code names are, if you feel like diving a little deeper, stuff like Dancing Oasis, Spinneret, Moonlight Path, and the more popular Prism, which focused on all the front door collection of data under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Then there's also Muscular, which was actually the backdoor collection from Google and Yahoo private clouds. There's just so much to look into here with all of the different programs and even a bunch of new information that has come out since 2013. And since this is the one that the majority of people probably know more about, we're going to move on to MKUltra. This was a program operated by the CIA from 1953 to 1973, and its main purpose was to create mind-controlling drugs and the perfect truth serum. But all of this was done through illegal human experimentation. Now, unlike the NSA one, this one here is really hard to actually get some information on because the fact that nearly all of the files on it were destroyed in 1973 under the direction of Richard Helms, who was the CIA director at the time. So the majority of evidence that we even have that any of it happened is from a handful of testimonies, a very small number of documents that Helms ordered to be kept, and then 20,000 documents that were later recovered relating back to MKUltra and some of their tests that they had already completed. It's almost like they didn't want anybody to know what they were actually doing. And according to what Stephen Kinzer said, this whole project was a continuation of the work begun in World War II era Japanese facilities and Nazi concentration camps on subduing and controlling human minds. Kinzer has a bunch of information on Nazi involvement throughout all of these different experiments, but it was the experiments themselves that really caught my attention. Many of these interesting experiments involve the administration of different mind-altering substances with many different results. Stuff that they were going for, such as to increase the efficiency of meditation and perception, to prevent or counteract the intoxicating effect of alcohol, to promote the intoxicating effect of alcohol, to render the induction of hypnosis easier or otherwise to enhance its usefulness, to produce amnesia for events preceding or during their use, to produce physical disablement such as paralysis of the legs or acute amnesia, to produce pure euphoria with no subsequent letdown, to promote weakness or distortion of eyesight and hearing, preferably without long-term effects. That's sweet. They're just trying to be nice while doing all of this illegally. And the most secret agent thing that I've ever read, a knockout pill that can be secretly added into drinks, food, cigarettes, or even used in an aerosol of some sort, which of course will be safe to use, provide a maximum of amnesia, and will come in handy when the agents need it most. And all of that sounds super interesting to me, and we have not even gotten to the LSD part. MKUltra experimented with so much with LSD that some documents came out in 1976 stating that the CIA was actually considering buying 10 kilograms worth of LSD, which comes out to about 100 100 million doses of it. And that's just clearly too much for anyone, so we're going to continue on to the next level. Now in level 2, we're still in the realm of what most people know about, but we're really beginning to have questions. Stuff like Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance, the JFK assassination, and Area 51. And I feel like all of those things need their own video, so instead we're going to go with what seems to be to me the most debated conspiracy theory of our day. We live in a simulation. Yes, the Matrix. We're just in a computer operating in a program somewhere out there in the real world, and all of this is not real. Yes, according to this theory, there is a real world out there, but we are not really in it. And I mean, how else would you explain stuff like this, or some of the glitches in the Matrix that you see? I don't know how to explain that. How does a bird just get stuck there? I don't know. And I'm sure that you've experienced some of the glitches in the Matrix yourself, like whenever you go to look for your keys and they're supposed to be in the drawer, and then you search the entire house because you already looked in the drawer, the keys weren't there. You look everywhere throughout the house, you're running late for everything you got going on, but then you go back and they're right there. There's no possible way that you missed them. Or there's people that also point to their neighbors and say because they have never seen them carry in their groceries, clearly something is going on. Yeah, sure, they walk the dog and they check the mail, but I guess they don't eat because they don't have to. And there's so many different examples out there of glitches in the Matrix that I'm sure that you've heard some really good ones, and I would love to know them. If you have a link to a video, please put it in the comments, or let me know one of your own glitches in the Matrix, because this whole thing just... But I think that we can all agree that Neil deGrasse Tyson put it in the best and worst terms possible, saying that we have a 50-50 chance that we're actually living in a simulation. And that's because we ourselves haven't yet made our own fully working simulated world that operates on its own. So that means we are either at the very beginning and we are the first and true world, or we're all the way at the very end of a long line of a bunch of other simulated worlds, which is like combining the Matrix with Inception, and it's even more confusing. Now, I will say, as a Christian, I definitely believe in a created world, but a simulation within a simulation is a bit much. And it's just like our next one, the Denver International Airport, because it's also like a conspiracy theory with a bunch of other conspiracy theories within it, many of them revolving around the art that's there, the construction of the whole place itself, and the apocalypse. But I ran into an issue whenever I was trying to look up actual facts behind all of this and where some of these conspiracies come from, because the airport itself fully accepts so many of these and actually embraces a bunch of them, which, hey, good for them. I mean, it made me want to visit whenever I started looking into it. And if we were to actually go there and visit, we would be able to view all of the different art pieces that people look at and say that it is somehow depicting or pointing to the apocalypse, whether it's a painting that seems to depict some Nazi imagery, which, if you're not picking up on it yet, there's definitely a theme of Nazis being involved in all different kind of conspiracy theories. I'm still not sure why. I'm sure there's a conspiracy theory behind that too. And along with the paintings, there's a giant blue horse statue with glowing red eyes that stands at 32 feet tall that many people refer to as Lucifer, and they say it's a depiction of one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. But the artist Luis Jimenez did make it clear that the glowing red eyes were supposed to honor the wild spirit of the American West. But you may want to be aware that this statement was made before the completion of the statue, because Jimenez was killed by a piece that fell off of the statue. So do with that what you will, fun fact, or part of the conspiracy.
You decide.
From Nazis to the Illuminati to the New World Order, during the construction and operations of the DIA, one, if not all of these groups have said to be involved, with many people believing that there is a headquarters of some sort located underneath the airport for these groups, as well as a bunch of tunnels that may even be up to 100 miles long, connecting the airport over to the North American Aerospace Defense Command. But the problem is nobody's clear on any of these facts. But one thing that I think we can be very clear on is during the construction of the airport in 1995, they ended up being 16 months behind schedule and ended up spending an extra $2 billion on the project, resulting in the total of the project being $4.8 billion. It makes me and many other people curious to why it doubled in price. Like, I've been on many different projects and I have never seen one double in price, especially not when we're talking about numbers like this. And it just leaves me and so many others with many, many more questions. And so we're going to make our way out of the tunnels of the airport and go up to the next level. Now we really start to get to the place that just scratches that conspiracy itch for me, as well as the next two levels after this. And for sure, everything's been super interesting and fun to research so far, but I mean, come on, who doesn't love Bigfoot and all of the other cryptids? Which I will have to cover in a future video, but right now, we gotta talk about the king. King Charles III is a vampire, or Prince Charles if you try to look it up, because of course he just became king and most of the theories came out while he was still Prince Charles. And this one reminds me a lot of the Denver airport because of how much he actually embraces the funness of the theory. Like, here's what he said to a local Transylvanian journalist. Transylvania is in my blood and I have family connections here, and that's why I'm very interested in this region. And of course, this family connection that he's actually talking about is Vlad the Impaler, or Vlad Dracula, the king's great-grandfather 16 times removed. Now, all of that sounds really cool to me because, of course, right up here is where Dracula is on the wall, and the book Dracula is right down here, which of course is the real life person that inspired Bram Stoker to go through and write Dracula. And King Charles also thinks that it's really cool, and that's one of the reasons he considers Transylvania a second home. And not only does he own quite a bit of property there, but he also does a lot of different charity work throughout the area. So much so that he's actually helped to build up many of the towns and the tourism around it. So much so that the mayor of Albo Lulia, I hope I said that right, has even proposed to give the title of Prince of Transylvania to what was the prince at the time. I don't know if they're going to update that and reoffer it as King of Transylvania, because that sounds awesome. And that's just the thing. All of this sounds really cool, and many people even trying to point to what the king looks like to say this is what a vampire would look like in their heads. But there's no real facts to back any of this up, other than his family relation. And if you know any extra stuff about this one or any of these, please just let me know down in the comments, because I can only study these so much before I have to go to the next one. And the next one is Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer. This is the one that made me want to make this video, just because I had never heard it before, and I knew as soon as I looked it up I was going to have to tell somebody else. And I hope that you have your tinfoil hat ready, or you have something to wrap your head in, because you're going to have to suspend your disbelief for a little bit. All right, you ready? Let's go. Starting off with the physical similarities, I mean, just look at this. That's all the proof you need. He was also born in Calgary, and his first and second victims' names were Cal and Gary. And how do you explain this picture that Ted Cruz himself posted on Twitter? And I'm sure if you decipher it, it says, "I am the Zodiac." Okay, but seriously, it seems like all of this actually started in a 2013 post that was made and just took off from there. And I mean, it's fun and all, and I thought it was super interesting at first, until I realized how much the facts have been stretched on all of this, because the Zodiac killings happened for the majority in 1968 and 1969, but Ted Cruz was born in 1970. And then people have to cover that one up by saying that both Ted Cruz and the Zodiac are super smart guys, and of course they could fake a document, which just saying that makes me need to tell you to put your tinfoil hat back on. But here's what blows my mind the most, is that people have latched on to this idea so much that there was actually a poll conducted down in Florida, and 38% of people that were interviewed believed that Ted Cruz could actually be the Zodiac, with 10% of them being absolutely sure that he is. And sadly, as much as I wanted there to be some kind of wild connection between the two, it just seems like it was all started by a meme that everybody for some reason latched onto, because it's pretty funny, that even Ted Cruz himself has also played into it. And this is the point to where if you're really trying to make a stand or an argument for any of these, people are going to start looking at you like you've lost your marbles. Like, yeah, trying to convince somebody that the moon landing is actually fake would be a lot of fun. Same thing with Biden being a robot. But I would much rather look into ancient giant trees. This one's a lot. And if you want to watch an hour-and-a-half video just on this topic and somebody breaking it down and explaining it, it's down in the description. I'm warning you though, it's a wild one. And I'll summarize from the summary that I got because I made it about 20 minutes into it and couldn't do anymore.
You think I'm out of my mind? Maybe you're out of your mind. This piece of bread is humans.
And I think it's because this is another theory within a theory, and that's how it all started. But we have to go back to flat Earth. Now, you may even believe the flat Earth theory or know somebody that does. But I've noticed a serious issue whenever it comes to the flat Earth theories and flat earthers is they can't just have their one theory. They have to begin to build a bunch of other theories to support their main belief. Stuff like all the satellite photos that we have of the Earth being fake, NASA being in on the whole thing, airplane pilots being in on the whole thing, the moon landing being fake. Now they add this theory on top of all of it. I mean, talk about completely rebuilding a worldview. And that's exactly how the video starts, with telling us that everything we've ever learned is wrong and that we have to start from scratch and rebuild off of what they have to say.
They make us think that this is a forest, when you actually are looking at 30-meter bushes.
Like when you see this picture, you might go, oh, well, that's Devil's Tower over in Wyoming, but you'd be wrong. Very clearly, this is just a giant stump from what used to be a giant tree. And this is just one of many petrified stumps across the planet. Flat planet at that. But now Earth as we know it is just a bunch of leftovers from what was the true forest, and all of the trees that we see them are basically just bushes compared to what used to be out there. And everything that we're actually walking on right now, being dirt and rock, used to be a part of a full living root system. But of course, that's not how it is now. We don't just have 40-mile high trees everywhere and bark covering the ground. And the reason for this, you ask? Some big thing happened thousands of years ago and wiped out all of the trees and completely destroyed the interconnected root system. What it was? Who knows? But I mean, who needs deep details? Look at this. Now tell me that doesn't look like a giant tree stump. That's all the proof that you need. Now I'd love to know more about this theory, but everything that I read was just repeating itself over and over. So if you know anything, let me know. And with that, we actually come to my favorite one that I've read off of this entire thing, and something I would love to dive way deeper into, and that's feral people in the forest. So we're gonna have to get serious for a minute because there is a very serious story behind where this conspiracy came from, and it all starts with a missing 411 case, a case that took place on June 14th of 1969 of a 6-year-old boy whose name is Dennis Martin, who was with his family the week of his 7th birthday in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And according to his father, he was just doing what any boy his age would do. He was playing with some friends that were also camping nearby, and then he decided to jump into a bush to scare his family whenever they came closer. But then after some time passed, his father realized that he was still in the bush for some reason. So when Dennis's dad goes over to check, Dennis is nowhere to be found. And of course, this scared Dennis's father and all the rest of the family that was there, that they began looking for him to no avail. And the search spread so much that it is actually the largest search to ever happen in this park, of 1,400 people looking for Dennis. The search included many of the local authorities as well as the National Guard and some Special Forces members. Sadly though, the search didn't turn up the boy. All that it did turn up was 2 sets of footprints. One that matched the exact same shoes that Dennis was wearing that day, and another set of bare footprints right along with Dennis's. Now on this exact same day, the Key family was staying in this same park, and they were out looking for wildlife a few miles away from where Dennis went missing. Then weeks after the trip, the family heard about the search, and the father, Harold Key, called in to the local authorities to alert them to some stuff that he had seen and heard while they were out that day. He had reported hearing screaming and seeing a figure run through the woods, and at first they believed that it was a bear until later, whenever the figure had got closer, and they realized it was a man hiding in the bush. And Harold is actually quoted with saying he was definitely avoiding us. And through this story, this led to the theory of feral people living within the national forest. And some people have actually added to this theory with missing 411 tie-ins, cannibalism, and referring to them as little big feet, like small Bigfoots, if that makes sense. Now, unlike many of these other theories, this one actually has a ton of information behind it, and that's most likely because of how long it's been around, but also the fact that there are many people that just live off in the woods in the national forest, whether they're homeless people or they're just people that wanted to escape civilization or even criminals. People point to sightings of them as the feral people, and then also trying to back it up with cases of feral children being found throughout history, which there's only about 100 cases of. And when you take all of this into account, you can really see how this theory has gained notoriety. So much so that American Horror Stories' 6th episode was actually titled Feral, which is about a husband and wife looking for their son who disappeared in the woods without a trace. But you'll have to go check that out on your own time, because right now we're going up to the next level. The 5th and final level on this chart, and this is the level that really begins to bring discomfort, but also those really good late night conversations with friends that will stay between y'all forever. And it'll stay between us forever. Talks about the reptilian overlords, talks about the Illuminati, talks about secret satanic rituals that are going on. But for us today, we got to talk about the Nazis on the moon. Because of course, we've already talked about Nazis in over half of these at this point. So if you remember back with me, in April of 1945, as the Soviets marched through Berlin, Hitler and his wife Eva Braun were in their underground bunker when they made the decision to take a rocket ship to the moon and live out the rest of their days at the Nazi lunar base. And that's exactly what this theory has to say, as well as this movie. Now, you may have heard that Hitler had escaped in a submarine to Argentina, or that he was down in Antarctica having his own secret Nazi base down there, which all sounds like fun, but not as much fun as Nazis on the moon. And as I began digging into this one, I was surprised to find that this was actually tied into another theory that is on the chart that I started to look into and then dropped, because I figured there was already enough Nazis tied into all of this. But it's actually from level 1, Project Paperclip, which I can cover in a different video if you would like me to, just let me know. But it's basically the German scientists' studies being used by the US after the war, as well as some of their scientists. And one of these scientists who was very pivotal in Hitler and his rockets, as well as getting the US to the moon, was Werner von Braun. I hope I said that right. Now, he had studied rockets his entire life, but it wasn't until 1942, whenever him and his group had actually launched the A4 missile 60 miles into the atmosphere, that he caught the attention of Hitler himself, leading to the building of a much better rocket, which was the V2. And when you start to really dig into all of their rocket studies that they had, it's very clear that they had very advanced things going on and very, very smart people. And the theory seems to push that these are just the things that we know about. Surely there has to be many other things that we don't know about, because if they can get rockets to space whenever they were first starting out, surely they can get Nazis to the moon. Now, as far as evidence for a secret Nazi moon base, the best thing that I could find was a soil sample from the Luna 24. The Soviets found in 1976 on a part of the moon that nobody had ever been to before, that the soil had already been disturbed. And somehow they were able to test it and determine that the soil was previously buried deep underground. And it's clearly because of the secret buried Nazi moon base. And there will be no more discussion on it, because we're on to the next one, which is Hollow Earth. And Hollow Earth is exactly what it sounds like. Our Earth is hollow, and some people believe that there is a full ecosystem on the inside. And this seems to be the biggest and oldest theory that we've covered so far, because it dates back all the way to the 1600s, when it was first proposed by a guy named Edmund Halley. And there's actually so much information on this that the Library of Congress has a full stack of information on it. Now, of course, whenever I think of this, I think of Godzilla versus Kong, but it's very clear after looking into it that this was not just based on a meme or based on any sort of half thought. Like, there is so much that was put into this. And so we'll just start from the beginning. The theory was proposed in the 1600s by Edmund Halley, then it was later disproven in 1774 by Charles Hutton, but it didn't much matter that he disproved it because so many people still continued on looking for the truth, including just a few years later in 1781 that Leclerc Milford led a journey with hundreds of Muskogee peoples through a bunch of caverns near the Red River just above the junction at the Mississippi. And according to Milford, the original Muskogee people believed that their ancestors actually came to the surface from these caverns. Milford also claimed afterwards that these caverns could hold up to 15,000 to 20,000 families, not just people, families. Now, there were many people also trying to find where the entrance to the earth actually was, and there was claimed to be a number of different locations, and some of them, other than the North and South Poles, were actually Paris, France, Staffordshire in England, Montreal in Canada, Hangzhou in China, and the Amazon rainforest. And yes, there are reasons behind why people believe that one of these could be the entrances to the earth, as well as many expeditions to find the entrance to the earth. Now, as far as what's inside the earth, there's a whole list of different kind of hollow earth theories. You have concave, you have convex, you have single shell, you have single layered, you have multi-layered, you even have all these different cryptid tie-ins, and including
giants.
And so with all of that, I do believe that this conspiracy theory could have its own video even longer than this one, and so I'm going to leave it there for now. And there's so many more things to talk about with these conspiracy theories, not including all of the other conspiracy theories on this chart from Abby Richards over at Tofuology on TikTok. And I did also find this other iceberg online if you would be interested in me actually covering this at a much quicker pace, hitting them one after another, as well as letting me know your favorite conspiracy theory that's either on this list or another one, so that way I might be able to cover it in a future video. Here's a hand so that way you'll be able to climb out of this rabbit hole and be ready to jump off into the next one with me. And with all that being said, remember that these are my odd thoughts on some odd facts about a very odd topic. If you like the video, leave a like on the video and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. And if you made it to the end of the video, I thank you very much. Have an extra blessed day, and I'll see y'all on the next one.